recording now. Also, a reminder that we have accessibility accommodations. If you need captions, you should be able to find those below. So I'm really excited for our lineup today. We've already been discussing throughout the last 2 months some really exciting ways that you can communicate your student vote efforts via op-eds, via social media, via writing, working with the media, both print and digital and broadcast media. But today we're going to dive into some lesser known, more obscure ways to communicate your student vote work. So we're going to start today with peer-to-peer texting. Then we're going to go into podcasting, and then we're going to round it out with digital advertising and using different digital tools. So there are so many amazing ways that you can communicate, that you can get your message to your community. But the first one, like I mentioned, is peer-to-peer texting. And to teach us about that today, I would like to introduce Andres Cubillos, External Affairs and Outreach Chair with Florida PERC students at FSU. Andres worked in 2020 during the general election to use peer-to-peer tactics such as phone banking, text banking, and relational outreach to bring FSU's voter turnout from 67% in 2016 to over 83% in 2020. Welcome, Andres.
Thank you so much, Zoe, for that introduction. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you so much for coming out today. Super excited to talk to you about peer-to-peer texting. Like Zoe said, a lot of the work that I did around these tactics worked during the 2020 general election. Shout out to all my Florida people who are here. It's great to see some people from Florida here on this call. So we are going to spend our time now talking about peer-to-peer texting, what it is, how to do it effectively, and how to make sure that you are working in a really good, strong environment. So you're getting as many voter registrations or any other method of communication work that you're doing done well. So we can go ahead and start with the next slide, which is we are America's largest generation. So students as a whole, as you all know, are one of the largest and most diverse demographics that vote. Our voices are incredibly loud and incredibly powerful, but more often than not, unfortunately, our voices go unheard on issues that we care about. And we aren't heard because we do not vote in large enough numbers consistently. The reason that we saw such a dramatic shift in our political theater in the 2020 election was because of how many young people mobilized to vote. And so we want to continue that momentum going into the 2022 midterms by using peer-to-peer communication tactics. So let's go ahead and get started. So moving on to our next slide, what is peer-to-peer texting? So peer-to-peer texting, there we go. So peer-to-peer texting is a very quick, simple, and flexible method of engaging with your peers and registering them to vote. Peer-to-peer texting can be used in a variety of different ways. It can be a very simple action after a phone banking event or after a meeting that you're having with other people or any other type of event. If you're really feeling crazy, you can have a whole peer-to-peer texting event. But that's really the beauty of this method, is it can be used anywhere at any time and in any place. The basic principles of peer-to-peer texting is that you are texting people who you're already friends with or you're already somewhat acquainted with. According to Circle data points in 2020, about 61% of students got the majority of their electoral information from their friends or from their roommates. Now, that might not always be a good thing, but we are here because we can capitalize off of that. And so an example of that from 2020 is after our voter registration phone banks, we would always ask our students to text 5 of their friends and ask them to come to our next phone bank, or sending them our studentvote.org link so that they could send it to 5 of their friends. So moving on to the next slide, we have 3 tips to run a successful peer-to-peer texting event. So the first tip is having a very fluid wrap. What does that mean? Thank you for asking. So a fluid wrap is really important for peer-to-peer texting because you are texting your friends, family members, or people that you have met in person. And so it's very important that your text is not overly formal because you're talking to people that you already know, and we're talking about something that is very important. So making sure that we're losing a little bit less formality makes it go a lot easier, and it really heightens the chance of them sending that link or joining you for another event in the future. It also, having a fluid wrap allows you to convey a sense of urgency around what you're doing. When you're texting people that you already know, you can use language that you use on a regular basis and day to day with your friends and family. So that not only are you having a nice conversation about voting, but you're also conveying the importance of what it is that you're doing. And then finally, texting people with a fluid wrap gives you the opportunity to give them a sense of ownership about what you're doing and about what they can do. So with registering students to vote in the 2020 election, we always made sure to emphasize the importance that it is you voting and it is you making your voice heard on issues that you care about. And so that fluid wrap is super important. My second tip is to have a strong and specific ask. The ask is what you are asking people to do. So for example, going back to my 2020 example, we would always ask people to attend the next phone bank that we would have, or ask them to send our studentvote.org link. Having a specific and strong ask ensures that people will actually follow through with the action that you are asking them to do. And so when coming up with your ask, there's a couple of things that you need to think about. First, why are you even texting people? What are you trying to get people to do? And finally, why should they care? So when formulating your ask, think about those questions and you'll have something very strong that'll get people to take that action with you. And so finally, the last one is have a big list of names. It is really important when you're doing peer-to-peer texting event to have as many names as possible. Texting is a very quick process. And so if you run out of names, you're kind of stuck in a place that you don't want to be. So that can come from having a really large contact list. That can come from being, for example, on campus, collecting people's phone numbers, asking them to maybe sign a petition with you, and then later calling or texting them. There's a lot of different ways that you can have a big list of names, but it is important for you to have that as a whole. Another great example of having a big list of names, for example, could be a membership list if you are running a club or an organization. And then my fourth unofficial tip is to have fun. Phone banks and text banks can be very boring, monotonous, and that's not what you want to have when it comes to a voter registration event. Something that we like to do on Florida State's campus is to theme our phone banks and text banks. So for example, during the past 2020 election, we had a boy band theme for one of our phone banks. So we had all of the people who attended dress up as their favorite boy band. I dressed up like NSYNC, and then later Big Time Rush. So having something fun to do while you are doing peer-to-peer texting will always make your event better and make it feel a little bit shorter. But that is the end of my presentation. If anybody has questions, feel free to come off of mute or drop them into the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andres. Does anybody have any questions? We'll stay here for a minute to let you think of any, but please raise your hand if you have any.
Andres, I want to know which member of NSYNC you dressed up as or you were channeling for that themed event. Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Justin Timberlake, of course. Nobody else.
I do have a question about texting, actually. So is the fact that it's peer-to-peer, does that mean you get around like having people opt in to get messages or the things that like the university or an organization would have to do if it was sending a text campaign?
So if you want to do it through your university, there are a lot of different ways that you can communicate with peer-to-peer. My school specifically, we have a listserv that we can send out. So it's not exactly texting, but there are methods that you can do through your university. A listserv is a really great example of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andres. If you want to put your phone number in the chat so people can email you if they have questions. Not phone number, email address.
Yes, I'll drop that right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm excited to introduce our next presenter, Jenna Spinell, who will be giving you all of the basics that you need to know in order to become an expert podcaster. Jenna is a writer, podcaster, and speaker in higher education. She hosts and produced Democracy Works, a podcast and narrative series, When the People Decide, which are both productions of the McCourtney Institute for Democracy at Penn State. She also teaches courses on freelancing and the creator economy at Penn State's Donald P. Belisario College of Communications. And her writing has appeared in outlets including Inside Higher Ed, Current, and The Statesider. Welcome, Jenna. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Zoe, and thanks all of you for being there. Yes, as Zoe mentioned, I host 2 podcasts. One is called Democracy Works, which is an interview show. The other is called When the People Decide. It's a narrative or documentary style podcast all about ballot initiatives and the people who organize them and how they have shaped American democracy over the past 20 years or so. If anybody wants to nerd out about direct democracy, I am here for it. We can maybe do that after this call. But for now, one of the questions I get a lot is, I want to start a podcast. What do I do? And I'm happy to talk about microphones and gear and all of that stuff if you all have questions about that. But I think before that, the bigger thing to consider, and what I want to focus us on here today, is the why. Like, it's one thing to actually get all the tech specifications, but if you don't know why you're doing it or what your goals are or what you want to get out of it, it can feel like you're just putting a lot of work in for nothing. So I want to help you think through, like, is the podcast a right thing to add to your communications plan? So if you want to go to the next slide here. There is definitely an audience. More than 130 million people listen to at least one podcast every month, 41% of the population as of last year. So, there's definitely a market there. And as you can see from this chart here, which comes from Edison Research, a market research firm that studies podcasting and a whole bunch of other things, it's continued to go up every year, particularly the past couple of years. Since 2018 or so, it's been steadily increasing, and I expect it's only going to continue to go up as more celebrities get into podcasts. It seems like everybody has a podcast these days. So, there's definitely, I think, more of an audience coming into the market. But if you go to the next slide, I think we all have images of some of the bigger shows that we all listen to, and thinking that, oh yeah, if I do a podcast, I'm going to get like thousands of people to listen to it. When the reality is that it's probably going to be closer to a few hundred people listening to every episode that you do, if you're lucky. The median download across all podcasts is 140 downloads per episode. And that's better than half of the shows that are out there, if you can even get that number. So that's important to keep in mind. I have that conversation a lot with stakeholders and leadership when it comes to metrics and things like return on investment, right? But I also say, if we could get 140 people to come to an event that we did, like, we would consider that a resounding success. And here, we're getting 140 people to listen to us week after week after week, knowing that there are so many different podcasts out there. There are actually more than 1 million active podcasts right now in Apple and Spotify's directory. So that's a lot of choice. And so anytime that somebody volunteers to listen to something that I do, I'm certainly very grateful. And if it's 100 or a couple thousand, like, all the better. So that really, if we go to the next slide, sets up this framework of understanding what your goals are, because not only are the numbers sometimes lower than you might expect, it can also be a lot of work to make a podcast. If you want to go to the next slide here. So you have to really set realistic expectations. It's more than just talking into a microphone, right? You have to go after, find your target audience, convince people to listen, do all of the editing that goes into it. It usually takes at least a couple of hours to put an episode together, maybe more, depending on what type of show you're doing, and just all the logistics and scheduling of finding guests or finding co-hosts and managing all of that. So it's a lot of work. You can't just sort of pick it up and on a whim decide to do it. You have to know what you want to get out of it and be okay with the return that you're going to get, likely in terms of number of listeners and all of those things. And let's face it, student voting is kind of a niche market, right? So just setting those expectations early with all of your stakeholders that, if you're doing a podcast, it should be for reasons that will benefit the organization and benefit your listeners or your audience, regardless of how big that audience might be. So if we go to the next slide here, there are several ways that I like to think about measuring success as you're having these discussions internally or with your stakeholders about whether to start a podcast or not. Keeping in mind, like, what is that big picture? For us at the McCourtney Institute, having a podcast and now 2 podcasts has been a great way to get our name out there. And it gives you a reason to reach out to people you would have no business contacting otherwise to say, hey, would you come on my podcast? Like, people love that. It's actually one of the ways that I got connected to SLSV was I had Nancy Thomas from the Institute for Democracy and Higher Education on our show back in 2020, and that led me to getting involved with the SLSV Communications Committee. So, it's a great calling card. It can be a funnel for your other activities. We've gotten people to come to our virtual events and built up our mailing list because they found our podcast and wanted to learn more about the work that the McCourtney Institute does. For a student voting audience, I think it can be a great way to communicate quick information or go deeper on, highlighting some of the people that are doing this important work on your campus or beyond. People love to tell stories and talk about their experiences. And as you may well know, the great thing about a podcast is you can listen while you're doing something else. So, while you're doing your laundry or walking your dog or all that kind of stuff. So I think that that's also great to kind of meet people where they are and get them information in a way that makes sense for them. Also, of course, a great way to highlight faculty and research and expertise on your campus as well. But it's easy to lose sight of that big picture as you're just in the work of putting out episodes, whether it's every week or every month or whatever you decide. And so knowing what that why is going in and keeping it in mind throughout the process is super important. And I think that might be it for me. Just a couple of resources. If you do want to learn more about the nuts and bolts of how to edit audio and how to record, I would recommend checking out Podcasting Seriously, Podcast Movement, and SoundPath. Those are 3 professional development training types of sites that you can go to. They have on-demand self-paced classes. They have live events, articles, blog posts, all kinds of things like that. And then finally, for students, I run a podcast network called the Democracy Group, and we are in the process of launching a podcast fellowship for students. So I'll drop my email in the chat. Reach out to me if you want more information about that. But happy to answer any questions you have now, technical or otherwise, while we are here together.
Thank you so much, Jenna. This is like really incredible information. And I hope that some of the people in this call maybe make a podcast. But does anybody have any questions for Jenna before she has to hop?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So what do you see the demographic being for podcast listeners? Is it mostly like you were saying, it can reach a wide variety of people, but is there any specific type of trend in the demographic at all?
Yeah, it does definitely skew younger, like millennials and Gen Z are definitely the 2 biggest audiences, with I think millennials being the highest, like people in like their late 20s to late 30s, I would say, maybe early 40s. But the biggest growth is coming actually in the college student age range. I think as more like Gen Z, as more members of Gen Z start to have podcasts, they're bringing that audience with them. So that's definitely a big growth possibility moving forward.
One of my favorite podcasts is the Student Vote Network, the Student Run podcast from Campus Vote Project. They always do really awesome stuff. Do we have any more questions for Jenna? Well, thank you so much, Jenna. This has been really, really fantastic. And I probably have some additional questions to you about the podcast.
Of course.
Oh, Valerie asked, what's a startup cost for a podcast?
Yeah, so I would say you should plan on at least a few $100s, maybe 300 or 400. You can buy a microphone. I don't have it plugged in right now, but I can hold it up here and show you. I have one that costs about $100 on Amazon, and plus another like $20 for this stand. But they have those arm things you can buy where the microphone comes down. So definitely investing in a good microphone. People are some people anyway can be pretty picky about audio quality. If it sounds bad, people aren't going to listen to it or aren't going to stick with it. So definitely buy yourself a good microphone, some good headphones, like the ones that Andres is wearing right now. Some good noise canceling headphones. Is that a microphone there too, next to you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I have my microphone and a little microphone stand that's connected to my desk right here.
Sweet. So that's a great setup. And then you'll also have to pay somewhere between $10 and $20 a month for a hosting service. So that's a service that takes your audio and sends it out to iTunes and Spotify and all of those things. So that's a recurring fee. And then I would recommend allocating some money for advertising as well, just because it's so crowded, just to help get that word out there. What about your guests not having a good mic? Yeah, so there are ways that some people do actually like mail microphones to their guests if you have the budget to do that. But honestly, like corded headphones work well. I think that's for the other kind of hack you can do is have people while you're doing your recording on Zoom or whatever, you can have people record a voice memo on their phones. That actually gets surprisingly good audio that way. But email me, Valerie, if you have more questions about that. Happy to talk with you offline.
Awesome. Do we have any more questions for Jenna? Jenna, your last point was a really great segue into our next conversation. So like she said, if you start a podcast, you should allocate some money towards advertising. I think that advertising is a really great way to encourage people outside of your immediate networks, beyond your friends and peers, to engage with the work that you're doing. So I'll kind of give you a brief overview of digital advertising. Thank you so much, Andres and Jenna. So there are a lot of different ways that you can advertise. You can advertise on TV, on the radio, but digital advertising is the easiest way for everyday lay people to get their message out to audiences beyond their immediate social media following or friends, family. And so the 3 different platforms that you can do social media advertising on beyond these 3, there's like TikTok and LinkedIn and stuff, but those are a little bit more obscure. But Twitter, Facebook, and Google are 3 ways that you can really easily plug in, get all of your materials plugged into the platforms that you're already using for your social media presence. But Twitter and Google especially offer ad credits to nonprofit partners that are interested in promoting their work or seeking donations, things like that. So I'll go platform by platform. So the first one is Twitter. It's called Twitter Ads Manager, is where you manage all of your digital advertising. And Twitter for Good provides up to $5,000 per nonprofit per month to run digital ads. So basically the way that digital ads work on Twitter is it's promoted tweets. That you so when you're scrolling through your Twitter feed, if you see a regular tweet that might be from someone that you don't follow, it might say promoted below it, and that's how you know that it is an ad. And then so Facebook is kind of similar. Ads pop up in your Instagram feed, which is, as we know, owned by Facebook. In your Instagram feed, in your Facebook feed, Instagram story reels. And this is run through Facebook Business Manager. They make it really simple. You can run ads both on Facebook and Instagram from the same platform, or you can select the platform that is best suited for your audience. And unfortunately, Facebook does not offer free credits for campus or nonprofit partners. But if you have a budget to do promotion or marketing for any of your upcoming events, or looking for donations, I would highly recommend Facebook. They really it's a good bang for your buck because you can reach two different audiences, and you can also do more high targeting, which I'll get into targeting in a little while. And then finally, Google Grants provides up to $10,000 a month for partners that are interested in promoting their websites as sponsored or recommended pages on Google. So basically, if someone like goes to search like Pennsylvania youth voting or something like that, Penn State could be at the very top, so that we know, and all of the recommended voter web pages can be available first thing, and instead of having to scroll to the bottom of Google. So those are the three main ways that you can do digital advertising in a really simple and streamlined manner. So when you're determining which platforms you want to be running digital advertisements on, there are 4 different things that you need to think about. You need to think about your goals, your audience, your timeline, and your budget. So when you're thinking through your goals for digital advertising, you want to make sure that you're thinking about really concrete metrics. So are you trying to reach a certain number of people with educational information? Are you trying to have a certain number of website links, website link clicks to direct people to an event registration? Are you trying to have a certain number of people attend an event? Or are you trying to reach a certain threshold for donations? These are really important things to think about, because that will then determine the audience that you are going to be tailoring your digital advertisements to. So when you're thinking through your audience, you want to think about who is your existing audience? Are you serving students? Is it the main people that you're trying to communicate with students, or is it other people in your community, on your campus, that you currently don't reach through your earned and owned media? So if there are certain demographics or groups on campus that you don't follow your social media, but you want to make sure get the educational materials or understand about upcoming events, this is a really great way to reach those groups without in a more passive way that lets them opt into coming and being part of your community. And then finally, a really, really great audience that I think a lot of us share is student voters. So advertising can be a really great tool for educational campaigns, especially around the election. I'm now on year 3 of doing an educational campaign using Twitter ads. And it's a really great way to get voter registration deadlines, information about how to learn about voter IDs, and things like that, things that, maybe people wouldn't seek out on their own, but that will be really helpful for them to know going into an election. And then the next thing that you need to think about is the timeline. So how long do you want to run this campaign? Are you planning an event that's in a month and you want to drive up attendance? You should probably start advertising for the campaign now, so that you can have enough time for the message to really get to the people that need to see it. You don't want to start advertising 2 days before an event, because you won't really get as much integration and impressions as you would hope to get out of a full-fledged advertising campaign. You need to think about your budget, and your budget can also impact your timeline. If you have $500 allocated to advertise for a specific campaign, and you have you might want to get it in front of a lot of people really fast, maybe you'll have a week-long campaign. But if you have $500 and you want to get it to as many people as possible, maybe you'll have the campaign be longer, for a month, so that fewer people see it each day, but more people see it over time. And then additionally with timeline, you need to think about what steps you need to take before the campaign. Do you need to draft graphics or videos? Do you need to film videos of people talking and giving quotes? Do you need to like source the funding in order to run the ads if you're doing them on Facebook? And then additionally, there's some additional like authorization requirements that you have to do in order to successfully run ads specifically about elections and voting that I'll get into next. But that does take time. So if you're planning on running advertisements for the 2022 elections, you should start doing research into that and start planning that now so that you don't get into a time crunch and have to scrap your plans, which did happen to me in 2020. And then finally, budget. So how much money do you have allocated for advertisement? This can come both from like your own organization's funding stream. So if you have, some money left over from event planning that you want to put towards marketing, that's a really great way. Digital advertising is a really great way to do that. But you can also work with Twitter and Google directly, like I mentioned, to get ad credits. And if you have, $5,000 in ad credits for this month and you haven't used them up, maybe you put them all towards this one campaign that you are really interested in increasing engagement with. Or maybe you split it up. So currently we are running multiple different advertising campaigns. So I have to make sure that our credits and budget is allocated specifically for each campaign. So I'm running less money for each campaign, but still and prioritizing the ones that I want more engagement with, if that makes sense. So yeah, those are the things that you need to be considering before you start planning your digital advertisement campaign. And what makes digital ads different than social media? Because a lot of these things are really similar to just running a social media campaign, putting things up on Twitter, Instagram, even TikTok if you're really into the new content. But the real thing that is special about digital advertising is you can target your message to the people that need to see it. So targeting varies based off of what platform you're using, but there are three main ways that you can target using digital advertising. So the first one is state or regional targeting, otherwise known as geo-targeting. So and with Facebook ads, you can actually get even more specific and target within a specific zip code. You can target down to like a specific school if that's something that you're interested in. I've known like digital advertising campaigns that literally are targeting the people in a specific building. But I do think that some of those restrictions, there are some restrictions on geo-targeting, specifically if you're doing political or electoral related ads. But there are not restrictions on what state or region you're targeting. So if you're trying to get information to people in Florida, for example, about their early voting deadlines or mail-in ballot deadlines, you can specifically make advertisements that are Florida specific and only target people that are in Florida to see them. In the past, we've done a variety of state based campaigns and left all the targeting the same, except changed the location to the different states that we were focusing on. So that's a really interesting way to use targeting. But two ways that I have found really, really helpful most recently are keyword and interest targeting and account lookalikes. So keyword and interest targeting is basically getting your message in front of people that are more likely to engage with it. So one way that you can do this is you can say, I want people to see this post that are really into, college and voting and maybe people who are in the STEM community. And so that you can get your messages in front of the people that you need to see it. And this is a way to get it in front of, different demographic groups, different age groups without necessarily having to keep your digital advertising campaign restrained. You can instead target to keywords or interests that are, more relevant to the groups that you're trying to target. And then finally, account lookalikes is really cool. I don't know if this is available on Facebook and Instagram, but on Twitter, you can have your ads be shown to people that follow accounts, specific accounts. So say you're trying to get your message in front of HBCUs, people that are serving at HBCUs. You can have your ads be shown to people that follow HBCU Buzz or HBCU Today. And so you're getting your message in front of people that are already tuned into these groups, and instead being able to direct them towards what you want to see, which is want them to see, which is really cool and a really great way to kind of expand your network and get your message in front of people without like directly messaging those people on Twitter and asking them to retweet your tweets. So digital advertising also varies from social media because there are certain kinds of messages that are best suited for digital ads. So I would say that event promotion is definitely one of the highest impacts that you can have using digital advertising, because you can direct people towards registration links. You can have a more like urgent call to action because you see there's a date that they must register by. One way that we have seen a lot of campuses use digital advertising is for civic holidays and other election related events. You can also use digital ads to recruit volunteers for your upcoming events throughout election season and to recruit poll workers on your campus. That is like a really interesting way to get your message into communities that maybe want to be represented at the polls that may not be aware of the need for poll workers this year. You can also use digital advertisement to increase awareness or educate your networks and people in your community about upcoming election deadlines, polling location information, ballot initiatives, how to research what's on your ballot. There are a variety of different ways that you can use education and awareness. And these digital ads, like I said, metrics earlier, you're looking for link clicks, you're looking for reach. But if you're doing an educational campaign, you might just be looking for impressions. How many people am I getting this in front of? You can reach up to 200, 300,000 people with a $500 budget. And you're getting that information in front of them and they don't even have to click on anything. They don't have to take any action. They're still seeing the message in their Twitter feed and their Instagram feed, and they don't follow you. So that's a person that is more likely to learn something from this ad because they don't already follow you. And then finally, one way that a lot of groups use digital ads is to get donations. We know that big donors are not as available specifically for our small nonprofits, our campus groups. If you're trying to fundraise for events or swag this year. So you can do grassroots fundraising using using digital advertisements and using targeting, really get in front of the people that have like your best interests in mind and would be willing to give to your organization. So definitely use digital advertisement to target philanthropic groups or types of people in your community that are generous donors. And then content, as we know, videos are really taking the forefront across all different social media platforms, but definitely they're way more engaging for digital ads than graphics. Try to keep them short and sweet. Less than 30 seconds is best, but 10 to 15 seconds is the sweet spot if you're making a video. Honestly, you can make a graphic, and if you're using Canva, you can just have that graphic be animated, and that is automatically more engaging to someone scrolling and seeing the promoted ad than a static graphic. So as much as you can, if you're doing digital ads, try to make the images move so that you can capture people's attention, because you only have a short amount of time to do that. But again, if you're hosting an event and you just want to put up an event promotion really quick and you already have all the materials, you can just put graphic up and it's really easy and you'll still get the job done. It just won't be as effective. But if you are making graphics, make sure that you're not using a lot of copy. Make sure that it's more image heavy, that you're using faces if you can. That will grab people's attention and it won't weigh them down and trying to read through the graphic. Instead, they'll click out to whatever you're trying to direct them to, and they can learn more information there. Try to make sure that these graphics are colorful. You want to grab people's attention. You want to make them stop and take action rather than keep scrolling because it's too much text and they don't feel like looking at it. But if you're making them colorful, make sure that they're still accessible because we want to ensure that digital ads are available for any of the people that we're trying to target, even people with disabilities. And then finally, try to make sure that there's always an actionable step that audiences can take once they've viewed your ad. So usually advertisements have a link built in that will be like surrounding the graphic or video to make that image clickable. And you want that action item to be easy for the audience to do. So whether it's attending an event, registering to vote, pledging to vote, or donating, you want to make it really clear whatever landing page that they are taken to, that what the call to action is and the steps that they have to take in order to finish it. Because you could have 5,000 people click a link and no one fill out a donation if it takes too long or if it's too confusing for them to figure out how to do it. Take it from me, I have experience that has happened to me in the past. Yeah, so those are my tips for digital advertising. Does anybody have any questions before I head into the next topic? Okay, awesome. Well, I'll keep going. So there are a lot of digital tools that can support you in all of the different ways of communication that you may be tackling this election season. And I'm just going to go through a couple of them that we have found have been really, really helpful for mobilizing student voters in the past. So I mentioned it earlier, but Canva is my favorite digital tool that exists. I don't know if you guys follow the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition's Instagram and Twitter, but I make all of the graphics and videos for those using solely Canva, and you can make anything, and they have presets and templates that make it really, really easy to plug in and make your content and information visually appealing and engaging to your audience. It's a really great way to, make digital ads, make social media content, but you can also make infographics, flyers to put up around campus, presentations. I made this presentation using Canva. And so there are really fantastic tools, and it's really plug and play and easy to use. So I really highly recommend using Canva through all of your communications efforts this year. Another tool, so that is really, really helpful and can direct your audience to a simple place to take action, is Carrd. I don't know if you've used it before, but it's a really simple website tool that you can put all links, relevant information, context setting to direct people towards. So this could be a really good landing page for your digital ads. If you have like multiple things that people can choose from, it can centralize any information. The example here is in 2020, we saw a lot of campus closures around the country, and campuses were struggling to communicate with their students in ways that they can navigate these closures. So we set up sample Carrd web pages that campuses could adjust and use for themselves in order to direct students on how to still vote if their campus closed because of COVID-19. So no matter what you're doing, if you're trying to centralize information, if you're trying to direct your audience towards a specific place, you can make a Carrd, and it's so easy and simple, and it's a good way to make sure that people get all the information they need. Similar to Andres with peer-to-peer texting, you can also set up a Google Voice hotline phone number for people in your community, in your network to reach out to if they have any issues voting, if they have any questions about voting. They can access it for student support throughout the year. And multiple people can access and man the Google Voice. So it can be like a fully staffed hotline that just like 3 people on your team have the app on their phone and can answer the phone if someone calls. So very, very useful tool for communicating and being an accessible educational resource for student voters this year. And then finally, the last tool that I have found is really, really helpful for communicating and keeping track of metrics is Bitly. So it's a free URL shortener that makes it really simple to plug URLs into graphics, to track metrics in digital advertising, to track, podcast listens. So basically, you can customize the URL so that the backslash is not just a bunch of numbers and random words, but it can be whatever word you want it to be. But what's even more cool is that you can track engagement, link clicks, where engagement is coming from on the back end of Bitly. So you can do A/B testing for your digital ads. You can compare and see, oh, more people are signing up for this event via Twitter than they are via email. So maybe we need to be prioritizing event registration via Twitter rather than email. So these are some really cool digital tools that highly recommend you implement into your communication strategy this fall. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question for the Google Voice hotline one.
Yeah.
So for that, are people able to like leave voicemails if and you're able to like call them back if you're not able to take the call right away?
Yeah, so Google Voice basically works the exact same way as a phone. It's just like it's digital instead of a SIM card. So they can leave voicemails, you can call them back. You can use it the same way as you would a phone number, but just more than one person can have access to it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate y'all taking the time to learn about some alternative communications methods. I'll be sending out this recording alongside all of the other recordings from our communications training sessions this summer. But I just wanted to thank you guys, and I'm excited to see the interesting and innovative ways y'all communicate this election season.